Yo, what up guys, it's Flark, and welcome to my 10.0.7 update video for Unholy DK. Yeah, we're not so good right now, huh? Kind of accumulation of things. The nerf over the season hurt, but then the epidemic and Unholy Blight swap, that one stung for sure. And then Rets. We don't really like Rets. The meta shifted to a kind of a 1-2 punch sort of deal with the bang bang, big on-demand damage, big hits, and Unholy has a good amount of burst, but it's kind of a ramp up, you know? And we don't have big chunky hits at a moment's notice, so staying in against these rep players and the warriors and the everything, it's really brutal for Unholy right now, but you actually don't have to just take my word for it. Look to your favorite DK, and if they queued as Unholy on their 32 or 3300 MOR DK, you probably know that they are now 2400 CR. they are down bad. I didn't actually queue on mine because what I did is I tried Frost first because I was really excited for the Frost changes in 10.0.7, and as I was queuing over the week, even after the ret nerfs, I was like, I don't think I've seen an Unholy player win a lobby yet. 06, 15, 06, 06. Names you would know. Peck Kick even rings a bell. 06, 06, 06. I queued him to a Mistweaver. 06, 06. I mean, it was unbelievable. So I was like, all right, maybe I'll pass on that. Make a emergency video from my YouTube faithful, and then just play some Frost, play some R Shaman. I don't know. But yeah, but there's hope. I forgot to say there's hope. I know, I'm always the guy with the hopium and the copium and the whatever, but I swear to God, there's actual hope, and you can't argue with this. This is good stuff. Unholy is bad in PvE. Exactly right, my bros. That is the best way to get your class buffed. If it is bad in PvE, that is what they actually care about, and Unholy is bad in PvE right now. So, with the 10.1 PvP talent rework coming alongside probable PvE buffs, that is going to come together, and you know this happens because it just happened with Ret, come together and actually make for probably a pretty good spec, and they will have to do that. So Blizzard, if you're watching this, be like, oh crap, yeah, you're right, we shouldn't do that. No, you should do that, yes. It's not my happiness that makes you angry, Blizzard. You really could do that and it would still be a good idea. Okay, anyway, so there's your copium. Go down to the timestamp below if you want my motivational message at the end. It will literally be timestamped like that, but I got to get into the actual guide. This guide is going to be stats. It's going to be talents, the new talents that got shook up in 10.0.7, and then, like I said, the motivational message at the end. If you need rotational help or cooldown management or comps to play, those are my other videos, so take a look at my channel. I'm not going to do that for every update video, but I will be doing it in 10.1 when the season is new and everything has changed, and we are ready for round 2 of this expansion. So look forward to that. Okay. Gearing. Easy stuff for Unholy. Verse, Mastery, Haste, Crit is terrible. You get Verse and Mastery and Haste, and Crit is terrible, and this is how you do it. You just get Verse and Mastery and Haste on every single piece. Haste on your insignia. Primary stat, big buff, and it is a sustain-based trinket, which Unholy loves. Haste ring. Mastery ring. Mastery boots with the CC reduction. Haste Mastery legs. Haste Mastery waist. This is a cool one. You put your Conquest waist into the tier piece generator, and you don't get a tier stat piece, but you do get the stats on the tier gear, which for waist is Haste Mastery. And I'm just thinking, oh no, you lose versatility. What do you get to do? It's fine. Literally, I have so much verse even without that, and this isn't even scaled up gear yet. You have so much verse on your base set of PvP gear that you're almost at the DR point. The 30% DR point in PvP, you're probably already almost there, right? And it's just the first season. That's how much verse you have right now. So you can sacrifice some of that for some massive output. Look how much mastery that has on it. Massive output stats. And one of the ways to do that is by switching your waist to tier piece. Cool. Okay. So then you can do the exact same thing on your bracers, by the way. What does this look like? Haste main stat, verse off stat, instead of the other way around. Instead of verse main stat, haste off stat. So you just sacrifice some verse and you get haste. And we know haste is a great stat because I said it. So haste and mastery, fantastic stats for Unholy. They work in tandem with each other. Faster globals, more damage per global. You get gargoyle juice by spending more death coils, to buff him by faster death coils and faster resource generation, and then he does more damage because of your mastery buffing him. So they work in tandem. Haste and mastery are tandem stats for Unholy and pretty much every spec in the game, but really Unholy can get so much value out of those stats working together. They really transcend your output. Okay. Then tier chest, because you gotta, and that's really the only thing you have to have crit on. Versus mastery cloak, you get the tier shoulders and then the necklace with 3 sockets, right? So here's one thing you can do. You can either grab Inferior's Helm of Vengeance and the tier gloves. This will give you some crit, which I already said is bad, so that's a little bit of a problem, but it does add damage, and Unholy always does damage, so it's kind of nice to have added damage. But if you're just really a fan of cranking out the biggest gargoyles you possibly can, with getting as much mastery as you can swap onto the tier helmet and the non-tier gloves. And you can see what happened there, right? This has mastery on it, main stat, and this has verse mastery, no crit. So you get a huge amount of mastery bonus from that. And you lose crit, which, like we said, is not a great stat. And it's going to be even worse than 10.1. Some food for thought there. So you can do that. Very simple. Just take the tier helmet and replace the tier gloves with verse mastery gloves. Easy. But that's how you get haste mastery on every piece to the best of your ability, including a very, very cool waist and bracers change that you can do in the tier piece generator. Anybody has access to this. Just put a conquest piece in there. Okay, and Fallen Crusader. I don't need to go over enchants. Get the speed or leech ones. Speed makes you go faster and leech makes you heal more. Easy. Okay. Talents. Not really going over the left side of things. They've been the same forever and ever and ever. The build link will be in the description. So, this hurts. Right now for Unholy, there are builds, and they have synergies, and they have merit, but Unholy's state right now makes it so I know that these builds will be good at some point, but right now, you might struggle even when you come up with, you grab this Flark build and you really put all the gear together and you play to your best of your ability, you might still struggle. Why? Because freaking, they're struggling. The best DKs, best Unholy DKs out there are struggling. So yeah, I mean, darn, but motivational message at the end, I promise. Okay, but here's the builds you got here. You got the regular pet build. Let's talk about that one first. Nothing has changed with this at all, but it will be linked in the description. Nothing has changed to what you select, but it's just gotten better, actually, because of the buffs, right? So the nerfs don't matter, right? But the buffs do. Your Harbinger now increases death coil damage. Sudden Doom lasts longer, which makes your Clawing Shadows hit harder. I've been trying this build, and it's really fun. You have big death coils, big Clawing Shadows, and a lot of pet damage, and a lot of burst. And then once you run out of burst, it's kind of weaker, and because you're really putting everything into that Unholy Assault Gargoyle window. But you still do pretty okay sustain because you have like Death Coil Clawing, Death Coil Clawing, Death Coil Clawing, right? You're getting the Death Coil procs, which makes the Death Coil do more damage, which makes the Clawing do more damage, and the Clawing does more damage, and you're good. And if they get low health, you got Reaping in there, which makes both Death Coil and Clawing do more damage. So you've got that 1-2 punch that becomes just a little bit stronger in Reaping range, and maybe you can finish some people. And it's good to have finishing power in a build that has so much burst because you can get them real low and then just finish them off with a crazy Death Coil or Clawing from across the map, right? 40k hit, maybe that's not ret level, but it does have good range, and it is something you can fire off so fast because of all the haste modifiers. You got a Holy Assault haste modifier and Power Rune Weapon haste modifier, so you can just go boom, 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 right? Little machine gun build, right? Pet build is fun. And when everything comes back to us and we get PvE buffs and rets are less powerful, this build is really good. Like, it's got all the synergies there. It's just that Unholy overall is just dampened, right? It's just down a little bit. But this build has all the synergies, has all the values. It just needs a little bit of tuning and a little bit of ret tuning. Okay, but now we have the other builds. Look at this. We have the hybrid build that's just worse overall, right? Here's the hybrid build that I adored, and this is the one I always played, and now it just has Epidemic for no reason, right? Because these swapped places. But you can still play this build. You just lose Blight. So you lose the Blight damage, and you lose the 2% on Morbidity. That is a huge loss from one talent swap. But there's nothing you can do to really fix that in the original hybrid build. You can run this, and the damage will still be there. It's just less than you did before. And I know how much that hurts. So we're just going to move right off of that. The Hybrid 2 takes a little bit less pain from that. So I'm just showing you the old builds and what happens to them. While it's the exact same problem, you don't get Blight. You can opt to just swap off of Morbidity and play Ghoulish Frenzy, because remember, it's a pet focus build, so having more damage during your Dark Transform and having more pet damage during your Dark Transform is really good, because it has the Commander set. This is the hybrid too. But you still lose Unholy Blight, so you still lose the Unholy Blight damage, but now you don't lose the morbidity buff. So it's there, it exists, it's less weakened than the other hybrid builds. So if you were running the Commander Hybrid 2, that I call it, right? A lot of people ran this Commander Hybrid with Super Strain and Commander. It actually still performs pretty okay. But then we have some changes that avoid this danger zone now, right? And grab some of the new buffs, right? So you can take the pet build, and instead of going down the full pet line, you go into Super Strain, and you keep all of this part, right? So you still have the Sudden Doom, you still have the Harbinger of Doom Death Coil buff, you still have the Clawing Shadows. Isn't that interesting? Super Strain with Clawing Shadows, but trust me, I've tried this a lot. The numbers are there. It's just Unholy is bad, but the numbers are there. And I know this seems ridiculous, but that's what hybrids are, right? Hybrid is taking a lot of different benefits and putting them all together, so you just have a lot of different ways to win the game. And if Unholy gets its numbers tuned, you will see this and you will go, wow, yeah, I can see that, because you have Death Coil buff damage, Death Coil buff damage, Death Coil buffs your clawing, clawing huge damage. You have a Gargoyle for some big bursts. You have Super Strain for some sustain, because Frost Fever still hits pretty hard, and Blood Plague gives you some healing, and Virulent Plague. Applying these is really nice when you don't have Even Fever, because you don't have to reset it as much, and the Frost Fever and Blood Plague already lasted a long time, so you kind of like can just have your dots on them always, and it's nice. And then you have the Frenzied buffing your damage, your pet damage, and your disease damage, and then you got Unholy Assault, giving you the haste so you can rapid fire off, like we said, the Death Coils for Gargoyle and the Death Coils for Clawing, and the buff Death Coils. So you have all these different sources of damage. You have the Gargoyle Go. You have the Super Strain Rot. You have the Dark Transform 45-second goes. You have the constant Death Coil and Clawing pressure. It all adds up. You can just do this, by the way. If you want to make a hybrid 3.5, just do what I did. Did you see that? Let me do it one more time. Here's Clawing. This whole package gives you really big Clawing. But if you want to swap from really big Clawing and you feel like, no, I just want the disease damage to be higher, here's how. That's how you did it, right? Both these talents actually fit into this build. That's why it's called hybrid. That's the definition of what hybrid is, right? The fusion of two things, right? So you can play the Clawing Shadow, and you've got all the setup for it, or you can play Plaguebringer, and you're like, okay, well, if I'm playing Plaguebringer, then wouldn't you swap off of? No, there's still a mastery component to Scourge Strike. It can still hit decently hard. It's not like Scourge Strike gets a huge modifier when going to Clawing, and you still get all the value of Death Coil damage. So you get Death Coil damage, and then you have like a big Scourge Strike. It's not going to be as big as Clawing, and it doesn't have the range, but when you hit Scourge, it'll give you the Plaguebringer buff, but then the global itself will be a little bit more impactful. And remember, Scourge bursts wounds, so you're going to be pressing it all the time to burst wounds for Festermite, right? And to burst wounds for necrotic wounds. So now each one of those presses actually has a little bit more weight to them. So yes, you can literally just do this. You can swap back and forth between these based on the comp you're playing, based on the comp you see on the enemy solo shuffle, etc., etc. And that's the third hybrid build, right? Yet another hybrid. And then we have the amalgamation right now. Oh God. So what I'm going to show you on the screen is an RBG-centric one. We look at this, don't immediately just like dislike the video. Well, you can dislike the video if you hate me, that's fine. But don't like just avert your eyes and just like crawl into a corner and be like, oh my God, what am I looking at? This is an RBG build. I'm just going to start here and show you the changes I would make to make it still an arena build. But I wanted to give you guys an RBG build because right now we're so down bad that it really hurts to play Unholy. But there's still actually somewhere it's insane. And it's literally RBGs. You have the most damage in the history of teamfight gaming. It is insane. And it's with this build right here. So I'm going to walk you through it first. So I know you're terrified by these disgusting talents that I chose. Just give me a second here. Okay. This is hilarious, by the way. All right, so what you got is we know what Festermite and we know what Super Strain do. So you've got these two capstones, and you're like, okay, those are familiar to me, but what is all this filled out for? Bursting Sores does a ton of damage if your wound generation is high. So the more wound generation you can get in a team fight for RBGs, the better. Okay, well, how do you do that? Well, first, Vile Contagion can effectively put all 6 wounds on everybody. All right, because if they're just stacked up from a Limgo into a Spear, maybe you're on Eots and they're all in a big pile. If you just press this button on a guy with 6 wounds, and it's very easy to get 6 wounds, you can now have 6 wounds on 5 people. And Defile is a big part of the build. You want to press Defile for the Mastery buff and for the Haste buff from Unholy Ground. But what else does Defile do? Well, it makes your Scourge Strike cleave. But Scourge Strike bursts wounds if it cleaves. And bursting wounds burst a wound on every single target, which gives you a bursting swords burst from every single target. So you effectively get your 6 wounds, press File Contagion, press Defile, and then burst it on everybody for the rest of the team fight. That is wounds bursting damage, that's bursting swords damage, that's Scourge Strike damage, that's Defile damage, that's the Mastery buff, that's the Haste buff. It is absolutely ridiculous. You get the Unholy Blight, which means you can play for Morbidity, so you still have the Super Strain Morbidity, which is another modifier. You still have your A-Bomb for quick applications of your 3-stack disease to everybody. You have Fester Might, which is going to be completely insane because you're bursting wounds on every single target in the RBG, which is giving you massive Fester Might, which is stacking up immediately your bursting swords damage and your Defile damage, and you have Pestilence, which is applying wounds to everybody in Defile, and you have 2 charges of it from Death's Echo, so it's pretty much permanent Defile. And then you have Plaguebringer for the disease damage, which is fantastic because you have your diseases on everybody in an RBG. And finally, you have this wacko Ruptured Viscera, which is just buffed rather, because Magus of the Dead is not that valuable in a team fight setting, especially in RBGs when they can just get cleaved to death. But your APOC, which you are of course running, short APOC, now applies wounds when the pets die, as well as a big chunk of damage, but the applying wounds is very valuable from all the wound generation that you need from bursting swords to be that impactful when you press Defile on everybody. Holy cow, what a build. I assure you, if you have nothing else to do and you're so sad that Unholy is bad, play RBGs, pray for an Eots, go to a team fight in the middle of the map and do what I just told you. I unironically did 98k DPS sustained in a team fight. They were constantly at 12% health. I got a whisper from one of their players at the end of the game going, dude, what the heck happened? It's just unbelievable. But I said I wasn't going to go over, but here, let me just show you what I mean. So you just raise A-Bomb. Just get the 2-stack right. You're building up stacks right now, and then you press that button. And now see what I just said? 6 stacks on every single person. Then you could just press Epidemic and Scourge Strike and Epidemic and Scourge Strike and Epidemic and Scourge Strike and Epidemic, Scourge Strike, and then you reapply Defile and then Scourge Strike. And look, you see I'm bursting all the wounds on everybody. I'm doing 200k DPS, and I was pointing my mouse at my abilities on my bar, right? It's just obscene. You just Defile is permanent. Defile is permanent. Epidemic is permanent. You always have Runic Power. You always have Scourge Strikes. You always have wounds. It's just, look at this spread. It's unbelievable. It's so funny in RBGs. It's never-ending damage. It's unbelievable. It's that crazy in a team fight in RPG. Okay, I'm done talking about this, but you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it, I promise. Okay. But how do you make this an arena build? Well, you just take off all the cringe talents and put them elsewhere. This is just Defile, right? So you would effectively either, you would probably just stay Unholy Blight, a Defile on this side, or sorry, Unholy Assault rather. And let me get out of combat so I can do it manually, because I know that visual learning is better than just me talking about it. So let me actually go through one by one, show you the talents. Once Timmy stops attacking that training dummy. Okay, so Vile Contagion cringe, Pestilence cringe, go back to Eben Fever, right? And now you're already getting close to the actual build. Go back to Magus, and then you know what to grab. Let's just fill it out for you. There you go. And that's the hybrid build with Defile, right? Effectively what Defile adds, and people have been running this, is that it gives you the mastery. It does some damn. And it gives you haste when you stand in anyway. So Unholy kind of wanted to press D&D anyway, even though it didn't really do much, because 5% haste with a sustained spec is pretty good. But now it gives you 8% mastery. It's pretty much permanent duration because of the 2 charges and the short cooldown. And you had to go down Unholy Blight anyway to get the morbidity value. So you effectively just add to file for 1 extra talent point. You get 8% mastery perma from it. It's not that amazing, but it exists, and maybe with changes in 10.1, you could play a build like this. And you get Grip of the Dead too, which is really cool. I said I wasn't going to talk much about the left side, but you drop 1 talent point for Grip of the Dead, which is 90% slow. So all the stuff that I was doing to those training dummies over there, the nuclear 200k sustained DPS that you can do in a team fight also comes with a 90% slow every time you put on Defile, which is really debilitating for an enemy team. Okay, and that's your builds. I'll have every single one of them linked in the description below, of course. Finally, Copium. I said it already. 10.1 has hope for Unholy. These builds that I just linked to you have internal synergies. They have really, really impactful things that just aren't tuned quite right yet. Our PvE damage is low, which is a very, very good sign for Unholy to get buffed, because they always buff based on PvE. That's like their thing, right? So, and if we know that Unholy is bad in PvP, then they're not going to be like, okay, we'll buff it in PvE, but make sure to keep it down in PvP. They could just do it at the same time. You buff some damage in PvE, it translates to PvP, beautiful. If they buff the right things, right? Rotational abilities, and that's another thing that Unholy lacks. Its rotational abilities hit much less hard than any class. Now, it's supposed to be like that, but maybe not this much less hard, especially with all the modifiers that you put in from the Sudden Doom, Rotten Touch, and they still only hit for like 30k, right? So they won't just do like PvE centric things that don't apply. They'll do rotational stuff. Death Coil, Clawing Shadows, maybe Scourge Strike, even a little bit of a pump up right there to make sure that its damage is on par in PvE, and those things will translate directly to PvP. That, combined with a 10.1 PvP talent rework, should be a perfect time to add some, because look at this, we have crap here. What is it? Rotten Wither, Doomburst doesn't even work with Fester Might, Spell Warden's getting removed out of the game, Necro Bargain has been a meme for so long, Reanimation is getting changed, right? They're clearly taking a look at life and death, that nobody plays it for any reason, right? We have PvP talents that nobody plays for any reason. And you think, how is this copium? Because in the 10.1 PvP talent rework that we've already seen in action now, they're taking the PvP talents that are dog crap and they are replacing them with things that actually have merit in a PvP environment. And if they keep doing that, we're going to have tons of options, in addition with probably PvE buffs, to be much, much better in 10.1. Plus, as you know, Unholy tends to do better over the course of an expansion. It was actually pretty wild that it was so good in Season 1. 10.1, what else does that bring? Season 2. Higher health pools, bigger death strikes, more focus on rot, preferably, especially with the crit damage and the healing crit modifiers, right? Those are going down from 175 to 150. It's funny that I leave this for last because that's the biggest impactful thing for Unholy. What are those big 1-2 punch specs doing, right? They're doing big crits. What do we have none of? Crit chance. Unholy doesn't care about crit at all. So those modifiers to crit damage and crit healing do not affect us in any way except positively, because classes that hurt us are getting affected by those. And classes like us, and other classes that benefit from those, all make a meta that Unholy prefers, right? Like maybe a Shadow Priest kind of Unholy, maybe what else doesn't need crit damage that much? Definitely Shadow Priest. Afflock, Unholy loves Afflock, right? If you've queued into a solo shuffle Afflock versus Unholy, that's something you want to see, not the Rep Paladins, but the Afflocks, right? So there you go. That, I know it's just Copium and Hopium, but those, I feel like those are good points. PvE buffs, 10.1 talent rework. Crit damage modifiers. That is massive. That's massive for Unholy. We don't like crit at all. Stay hopeful, please. 10.1 will fix it. Trust me. Peace.